This is a fan-generated show. If you would like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com, and also don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. All your support is greatly appreciated.
Good evening. Welcome to the Glazov Gang. Tonight, we have a very special guest with us, Christine Williams, an award-winning journalist and a contributor to jihadwatch.org. Christine Williams, what an honor to have you on the Glazov Gang.
Jamie, it's an absolute honor to be here, and we're on different sides of the mic this time around.
Absolutely. So the audience knows about 10 years ago, Christine started having me on her show in Canada. So this is an interesting development.
It sure is, Jamie.
And thank you, Christine, because I was kind of like almost a bum on the street knocking on doors, and finally somebody let me in, and it was you.
Not quite, Jamie.
Christine, very, very frightening development right before our eyes. Canada's surrender to Islamic blasphemy laws, question mark. Perhaps a question mark should be there or not. What's going on in Canada, Christine?
I would say, Jamie, that very comment that you just made is in the midst of happening right now. Back in October, and this is very key to understand, most Canadians don't even know what happened in Canadian Parliament in October. There was a petition that was tabled in Parliament by Thomas Mulcair. Now, he's the leader of the New Democratic Party in Canada. This was petition E411. And Jamie, I'm going to quote a little bit about what that says, because it's very important to understand the wording of that particular document. It says, "We, the undersigned, citizens and residents of Canada, call upon the House of Commons to join us in recognizing that extremist individuals do not represent the religion of Islam, and in condemning all forms of Islamophobia." Note that extremist individuals do not represent the religion of Islam. Really, how did that ever find its way in Canadian Parliament? And that is a very big question. And the motion passed. That's what's disturbing about this, Jamie. The motion passed, and it passed unanimously. A big question that's still outstanding is how many conservative members were in Parliament at the time, because as far as everyone knows, there were a few conservatives in there at that time. And there's this big question: why did they vote for this particular motion?
Thank you, Christine. So look, this is anti-Islamophobia motion. So what can this really do? This is obviously an attack on free speech, especially on truth-telling about Islam. Now, here's what's so scary. What if some people want to say Islamic Jihad is a problem, ISIS is a problem, because there are people who happen to be Muslims. Obviously, not all Muslims follow their own teachings. However, there's Surah 9.5, Surah 9.29, Surah 47.4 that mandate, that inspire, that sanction violence against unbelievers. Will people be not allowed to say this anymore?
Well, that's the fear, Jamie. Now, I noticed that you mentioned ISIS, the Islamic State, but here's a problem right there. I mean, they're saying that extremist individuals do not represent the religion of Islam. But what about beheadings? What about the cutting off of hands? What about stonings that are still going on, recognized in Islamic states? The persecution of Christians is ongoing, as well as, let's not forget, in 2002 in Saudi Arabia, 15 girls, because they did not have their faces covered, were allowed to be killed, died in a fire in a school because the religious police would not let them leave. This is not ISIS. This is what's going on in Islamic State. Since 1948, you have something like 11 million Muslims that were killed by other Muslims. That is extreme. The words of the Quran, of the Hadiths, the Sunnah, they're being quoted, they're being used, they're being invoked. And what this motion is stating, or what it's suggesting, is we're not going to be allowed pretty soon to call out what's going on in Islam. And why is that even an issue? Christ is regularly mocked in comedies, in cartoons. What is happening with free speech in this country? And that is the fear that's circulating in Canada now for those who recognize what's really behind this motion.
Right. And Christine, it's just incredible how, the left frames the dialogue, and it's a completely phony framework that somewhere people who are concerned about jihad and want to protect themselves from jihad in our society somehow hate all Muslim people. And this is just ridiculous. Everybody knows there are many, many Muslim people who either go by the label Muslim or don't follow the Quran and Hadith to the last I and T. We got that. The problem is that there are Quranic texts, there are texts in the Hadith that inspire and sanction violence, and then the jihadists operate from those texts. This is a problem.
Well, Jamie, here's an example. Picking you up on not all Muslims espouse this. There are a lot of Muslims that are very upset by that motion with what's going on in Canada. And I'll give you an example of another Muslim that I've met, and I've interviewed this fellow, and this is Sheikh Subi Mansour. He was exiled from Egypt under Mubarak. He said that once he was exiled, he used to be an Al-Azhar professor, and he came to Boston. He went to mosque to pray, and he was shocked at the radicalism that he found in that mosque by the texts, by what was being preached in Friday prayer. He was horrified by that, and he's one of those that speaks out. The point of the matter is, you do find mainstream Muslims, mainstream Muslim groups that are connected with the Muslim Brotherhood. We know them as those that are unindicted co-conspirators. Were called that, were dubbed that during the Holy Land Foundation trials. And we understand what their connection is. We also understand that not all Muslims represent radicalism. And something very important that needs to be noted, there's a fellow by the name of Muhammad Abdurrahman. In fact, Abdurrahman Muhammad. He was a former member of the International Institute for Islamic Thought, and he was there when the word Islamophobia was conceived. He was around that table. And what he said was that, quote, this loathsome term is nothing but a thought-terminating cliche created in the bowels of Muslim think tanks to beat down critics. Right. This happened before 9/11. It happened before ISIS or any atmosphere that we're seeing today. It was a trumped up, no pun intended, term. It was an invented term to beat down critics of Islam.
And well, Christine, look, this is also what I'm about to say. This is for another program, and a lot of us already know this, but if one studies the conduct of the Prophet Muhammad, and I put prophet in quotation marks, if you examine his conduct, you study Muslim sources, there's absolutely nothing radical when Muslims follow his conduct and engage in violence and other activities. But we got that. But this is a harsh truth that many portions of our society does not want to accept. And pretty soon, as you're saying, it might actually be illegal to point even to what the Muslim texts tell us themselves. Look, here's the danger here. We got evil lunatics, and we're still not sure exactly what happened at that mosque at Quebec, but it appears to this stage, let's say it's an evil, it looks like it's some kind of evil white guy, kind of Timothy McVeigh kind of character. Perhaps the narrative will change, I'm not sure. This is evil. We all reject this, killing innocent people no matter who they are. He's killed Muslims in this case. But what will happen is that the acts of this horrible person are going to feed this Islamophobia censoring attempt, right?
Yes, it will. Yes, it will, Jamie. And that is a very sad thing indeed, because it's an entirely separate issue. In fact, what has happened ever since this attack is that you do find those that are trying to push this anti-Islamophobia agenda using that. And I find it absolutely appalling. I find what they're doing is that they're using the suffering of innocent people that got attacked, gunned down in that mosque to serve an agenda when it's a completely separate issue. In fact, a while ago, this was a sad prediction I made on Jihad Watch, and I was actually criticized for that by a blogger that was actually quite anti-Muslim, because I warned about the possibility of the types, in fact, supremacists are awful on any side. You've got white supremacists, and this is not being confirmed, by the way, that the person that did shoot up that mosque is a white supremacist. There's a lot of secrecy surrounding that issue. Nobody knows what really happened at this point. Right. The media is strangely silent. At first, there was a Muslim that was implicated, but that, as far as we know, got thrown out. But there is still a lot of secrecy that is involved with that particular event. But one very important point that needs to be noted, and I know that you're running out of time, Jamie, is that there was a CBC article that came out by Neil MacDonald, and I found the article appalling, because it was actually, it was entitled, he talked about, he said specifically in his title that if you notice the history in Canadian mass murders, it's whites. It's white supremacists that do this, Canadian-born whites. And that is really an offensive thing to say. The simple truth is, he said, in fact, I've got that quote here, Canada's mass shooters are usually white and Canadian-born. I found that a very racist comment against whites in itself. And it's not true, because the worst massacre that ever happened in Canada happened at that Polytechnic Institute in Quebec. And in fact, what a lot of people don't realize is that the L'École Polytechnic Institute, the shooter, whose name was Marc Lepine, his real name was actually Gamil Garbi, because his father was actually a Muslim, an Algerian Muslim who hated women, and he treated his mother deplorably. And that came out in the news, but people did not realize at that point that this fellow was born Gamil Garbi, and he was actually brought up under the domain of a father who taught him to hate women, who was a Muslim himself. This was kept secret, and it was painted to be some other issue altogether.
Absolutely. Christine, let's wrap it up because we've run out of time. Let me ask you this. So in terms of this Islamophobia motion, how serious is it in terms of, look, what they're really trying to do is disable our ability to defend ourselves against jihad, because the moment that we're not going to be able to say anything, if we cannot even speak what the roots of the beliefs are of the terrorists that are attacking us, we can't even make a threat assessment. And this is, by the way, what the totalitarian forces do all the time, too, in terms of triggering a lot of this. We know that the KGB, it spawns and engenders a lot of these phony attacks on certain sides, and then it engages in this censorship and in this crackdown. So who knows what's happening here in terms of what happened at that mosque or what might happen in other time and place. But this is very scary what might happen, right?
And a second motion, motion M103, has also been introduced by Member of Parliament Ikra Khalid. She introduced a second motion, which again is another anti-Islamophobia motion, and her connections with the Palestinian resistance is very well known, and that is also very troubling indeed.
Okay, Christine, what can Canadians do that care about their freedom and want to protect themselves?
There's a document that Act for Canada, a petition that Act for Canada would like people to sign, and it's very urgent. It's very important that they do so in order to let their voices be heard, because this document attempts to fight for free speech and to raise awareness as to what exactly is happening in Canada and what we're actually at risk of losing at the feet of Islamic supremacy.
Thank you so much, Christine. And what you bring up there is we also have the link on the bottom, and our audience will be able to see that link. Please go to that site. But speaking about actforcanada.ca, such a marvelous lady, Valerie Price, has actually sponsored this program. So we love you, Valerie. Christine, would you like to say something to our sister, Valerie?
I'd like to tell Valerie, thank you so much, Valerie. Your work is absolutely essential, and you are doing an awesome job at raising awareness and fighting for our freedoms in the country of Canada that is very precious to us.
And thank you. And Christine, thank you as well. I want to tell all of our viewers, if you're interested, please check out this freedom fighter. She's doing amazing work. She's contributing at jihadwatch.org. Is there anywhere else that they should be watching you, Christine?
Well, I'll say right now at Jihad Watch, but the International Christian Embassy in Jerusalem, if you go to that site, you'll also find some of my work there.
Thank you. Christine, just on a personal note, over the years, I've observed everything you're doing. We're also very good friends. Thank you for your noble way of how you're always perpetually, consistently standing up for the truth and for freedom. Thanks for all that you do.
Thank you, Jamie. It's an honor.
Thank you. And thank you for watching the Glazov Gang tonight. If you are happy or interested in what we do and you support us, please go to jamieglazov.com to support the show. And please make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel of the Glazov Gang. Good night.
This episode was sponsored by the coolest and loveliest woman walking the planet Earth as we speak, Valerie Price, the Canadian godmother of the Glazov Gang. She is also the head of Act for Canada, the Canadian chapter of Bridget Gabriel's group Act for America. Our dear Valerie, we want you to know how much we love you and cherish you, not only for the beautiful person you are, but also for all that you do from your heart and soul
for freedom and freedom fighters all around the world. Thank you for being our sparkling Canadian queen. We appreciate you forever and ever.